Today's World Insight, recovery from the pandemic economic shock, the bright spots and the prospects from the chief executive of China's CITIC capital.
Pandemic will force many businesses online, and China is well positioned for that.
And Hong Kong business, education and political figures spell out the reasons for the NPC's recent decision on the HK-SAR national security legislation. Here is our host, Tian.
Hello and welcome to World Insight on CGTN from Beijing. I'm Tian. Last week's two sessions, the annual political gathering in Beijing, was a key moment to assess China's economic health and its future direction. Despite not setting a GDP target in the wake of the coronavirus pandemic, China is still eyeing economic growth this year. But one reality we have to face is that demand overseas remains extremely weak, as the pandemic virtually hit the whole world, and domestic demand hasn't picked up to the level that we want yet. So, what is the state of the Chinese economy? In the past decades, the country has had robust year-on-year GDP growth. What do we make of this year's change? I asked all of these questions to Yichen Zhang, founder and chairman and CEO of CITIC Capital, the China International Trust Investment Corporation, for answers. Mr. Zhang, as an investor, how do you look at this both challenge and opportunity time for you? I mean, when it comes to rescue financing, emergency funds, and dealing with the debts those companies have and buying out.
It is a severe blow. We have many portfolio companies in China, and they are affected to varying degrees. Some of them, for example, like McDonald's, initially it went down as much as almost 50% in terms of sales in February, but it has been recovering very gradually, and initially, but later on very rapidly. At this point, we're over 95%, in terms of the sales relative to the last year, and that's tremendous recovery, and mainly due to the digital infrastructure in the country, as well as we put in, for example, delivery and contactless mobile order and contactless pickup together account for over 70% of the business. That has enabled the company, McDonald's, to recover so quickly. But on the other hand, we have other companies in tourism, offline education, and those companies are going through a very hard time. And we work with local governments, we work with the banks in terms of restructuring, and so far, obviously there were very hairy moments, but we are able to weather through it. And just based on my anecdotal experience, also doing the CPPCC, talking to many other colleagues in the economic sector, because the bankruptcy process in China is not as straightforward as in the U.S. or other developed countries, because it's a fairly drawn-out process. So when you indicate it that you may be going down, this is when the help will actually come in. So instead of a blanket sort of a relief effort, which the U.S. and Europe was doing, China can be more targeted and trying to help only the companies that's about to buckle under the pressure. So it's more precise in some ways.
Do you see that kind of precise structure in terms of rescuing and support to companies already being established?
I think every level of government is clearly tasked with protecting employment, protecting jobs as the top priority. There's no doubt about that. So In some ways, China is a more of a top-down sort of a political structure. At this point, if you look at it, how China has weathered through this, pandemic economically, I would say the ordinary people, sort of took care of themselves in some ways because China has higher level of savings and China has a better family support system. That's the first level. And then the second level is the companies. Companies, I haven't really heard that many companies who are announcing openly and laying off people simply because the pressure from the government and the social pressure as well. So the companies are really bearing a great burden and bearing the brunt of this impact. But if there are, there's only so much you can do if you got no money left and you have to close up. And that's when the government will coordinate the banks to come in to help. I've been through the process on one of our portfolio companies, and I've heard many other cases. So the rumor of a widespread unemployment is perhaps exaggerated because the pressure overall on the company and the help it's getting if it's in critical conditions are helping, sort of saving jobs.
At this year's annual political season, Mr. Zhang, as a CPPCC member, submitted 11 written proposals which touch on hot-button issues such as financing small and micro enterprises, talent building of the Guangdong, Hong Kong, Macau, Greater Bay Area, enterprise load reduction, and many others. He also mentioned state-owned capital supervision in his proposal. How can modern management systems help turn around state-owned enterprises? That's a topic people have been debating for a long time. So what are the takeaways from these proposals, and how could they help to improve the current economic reality in this country? Let's listen to him once again. You suggested this year that the state-owned enterprises, the large ones, they should abide by the principles of a modern management system. The board should serve its purpose. Exactly what you meant, and how is that likely to interact with the current economic situation China is facing? So is the realities of Chinese companies.
Well, Chinese government has been promoting this mixed ownership reform of state-owned companies. And however, the specific rules on post these reforms of these companies, how the company should be governed. Mainly in the case of if the state remains the dominant shareholder, meaning that owning, above, owning more than 50% of the company, then it's very clear it still needs to follow the state-owned asset sort of decision-making process. However, in many cases, in the case that the state owns less than 50%, as opposed to it's only a shareholder like all the other shareholders, then the company should be governed more by the corporate laws that governs all the other companies. So I'm not saying it is not, but we need very clear guidelines so that there's no confusion.
What kind of guidelines exactly are you referring to? What details do you think are extremely necessary now?
I think as more and more of the SOEs are going through the mixed ownership reform, we need, clearer guidelines from, for example, the state administration of state-owned asset, SASAC, which is under the State Council. I think that part needs to be clear.
Another thing you mentioned earlier, sir, which is about some of the businesses you are running, including the food and beverage companies, suggesting that the new technologies are helping you to weather the storm right now. Now, would that give you a second thought as to where to invest for the future, and also how the existing companies are having to restructuring them in the near future?
Generally, I think China was able to weather through this pandemic, because of the effective control measures. But at the same time, when you control, people still need to live, and you need to be able to, to get food, to get basic services. And this is where the digital infrastructure came in. And luckily, China was, in the past 5 years, had a booming infrastructure in digital, business, and you have delivery everywhere. Everything is online, and I think that trend will continue. And just like in the U.S. and everywhere else, and this pandemic will force many businesses online, and China is well positioned for that. And you're going to see gains of online companies further, and that is a direction for our future investment, and many, helping many businesses moving not just from the 2C sector but to the 2B sector to have their business online in digital form, and and then building up the logistic infrastructure as well, and plus I think there is technology decoupling that's going on with the U.S. and which will help some of the Chinese players who could replace unreliable vendors from the U.S. and so these are the directions and focus for our investment.
Talking about the infrastructure investment, may I just follow up on one thing? According to the government work report, likely to be new infrastructure investment, which could include basic infrastructure investment together with integrated infrastructure investment and what they call innovative infrastructure investments. Now, these are abstract categories. Which specific category and which specific content could help you and your business as you just analyzed?
Well, as China further improves its digital infrastructure, which is all the things that you mentioned, the 5G, with more data centers and AI and Internet of Things, I think obviously all the entire digital infrastructure will be greatly improved, even better than now, and that will position China at the forefront of that, the sort of a revolution or movement ahead of all the other countries.
This is World Insight. I'm Tian Wei. Coming up in our program, I talked to well-known business, education, and political figures from Hong Kong SAR to spell out the reasons for NPC's recent decision on the Hong Kong SAR national security legislation. Those interviews right after this break. Welcome back. You're still watching World Insight. I'm Tian Wei. Let's now focus on the decision regarding the legislation about the state security issues of Hong Kong. On Wednesday, Hong Kong SAR Chief Executive Carrie Lam will visit Beijing, and the central government is set to listen to Mrs. Lam's views on the legislation. Political advisors from Hong Kong during the annual political season have issued a statement expressing support for the proposed new security legislation. With the pandemic on the one hand, there's also the uncertainty on the other hand over the upcoming Legislative Council election in Hong Kong. Where is the SAR's future headed? I talked to Henry Tang Yin-Nian, a CPPCC Standing Committee member and also the chairman of the West Kowloon Cultural District Authority in Hong Kong. Take a listen as to what he had to say. Mr. Tan, if I could, asking your thoughts about the one country, two system principle again, since there are a lot of things happening since last time we talked, and the 4 sessions certainly also give us some new inspiration. What do you personally make of it?
Under the one country, two system, we love our motherland, and most of the people in Hong Kong are patriotic. So there's no doubt that under one country that we can enjoy the advantages of two systems, where we have a convertible currency, we have an open and free society, we have an independent judiciary, and these aspects have placed Hong Kong in a very, very important strategic position, both financially as well as economically. So I've no doubt the one country, two system is the best way forward for Hong Kong. Secondly, I have every confidence that the Central People's Government will also believe that the one country, two system is the best way forward for Hong Kong, and they will adhere to the principle of the one country, two system. Thirdly, we have returned to the motherland for nearly 23 years, and it has been not been completely trouble-free. Together with the Central People's Government, we must be able to stand firm on our belief of the one country, two system. We must be able to formulate policies that are beneficial to both Hong Kong and to the Central People's Government. So the People's Republic of China, with Hong Kong and Macau as its two systems, will be able to take the best advantage of this strategic development.
Only a few months from the Legislative Council election. Now, earlier last year, we have seen the local election in the districts. The results reflect a certain degrees of unsatisfaction the public has toward the administration. How do you think officials should work, and how do you think the Legislative Council election is likely to proceed 5 months from now?
The district council, the local council elections were held in November of 2019 amid the social unrest. And in all the social unrest, all the months that leading up to it, I think a lot of people were dissatisfied with the Hong Kong SAR government, and they have expressed that dissatisfaction with their votes. So they have voted for a lot of the pan-democratic members of the opposition, and because the system is first past the post, a simple majority will take the seat. Therefore, the opposition have gained a lot of district council seats. Now, looking forward, we are going to have Legislative Council elections in September of 2020, which is only about 3.5 months away. So I am, of course, very concerned that this dissatisfaction is going to carry over from the last social unrest. I believe the opposition is trying to galvanize the community and remind them of the social unrest before, and ask them to continue with their futile efforts to take over the government as well as the Legislative Council. I believe the patriotic members of the Legislative Council and the community will have to work very, very hard in order not to allow them to do that.
Hong Kong's business community, backed by some of its famous billionaires, is upbeat on the benefits of a national security law for the city. That is according to an industry survey. About 61% of the respondents said the law will either have a positive or no impact at all on their businesses over the long term, according to the Hong Kong General Chamber of Commerce. So, will the legislation create a more law-based and stable business environment? Could Hong Kong maintain its status as a global financial hub? Will it help restore confidence? I talk about all of these questions to David Chu Tai Chung, the head of Far East Consortium International, who's also a CPPCC member. What do you then, David, make of the timing and the significance of this legislation, despite of the fact that Hong Kong is pretty much divided already, but this legislation, what does that mean for the security of Hong Kong?
Well, obviously, I think the majority of the people in Hong Kong just want to return to their normal life. And therefore, I truly, for one, believe the quicker the legislation are passed, it will be better for Hong Kong as a whole. But how quick? There is a process, right? And also, there's also about the details about how to implement it, who to implement it, under what circumstances to implement it, within what time frame also. David? Well, legally, this have to be implemented by Beijing. I'm afraid there is no definite answer can be given today. But I was told it could take up to 3 to 4 or even 5 months for the legislative procedure in China. But to us, for the people of Hong Kong, the quicker the better. What do you mean by the quicker the better? Why? Well, because, you know, if I'm sure you see already, there are riots in the street every day. I mean, they're beating up people on the street. They're disturbing shopping center. They're disturbing MTR, the train station, the people want, even the people normally driving the car in the street. So if only one comes to Hong Kong, they would realize they are truly disturbing and being a nuisance for everybody day-to-day life of Hong Kong. So therefore, it is only natural and it's understandable why Hong Kong people want to make it as soon as possible, that hopefully they can all go back to their normal life. Of course, David, as you may know, there are a lot of different opinions in the international media, to say the least. Meanwhile, some governments have threatened, or at least the representatives of certain governments have threatened to slash sanctions either in Hong Kong or at China as a whole. So David, as one living and working now in Hong Kong, what do you make of these threats, different opinions, and also certainly harsh words? I think the threat is groundless. Which Hong Kong is part of China? Which country on earth will allow anybody to disturb the securities, the independence of their own countries? And frankly speaking, I was born in Hong Kong many years ago. Hong Kong to the world are at its best as an economic center. Hong Kong have never been a political center. Hong Kong serves the world best. We are the New York of the East. We are the financial center. We're the tourist center, and we also the door opener for China, which benefit a lot of companies that go into China to invest and vice versa. So I think the world should appreciate the function of Hong Kong are at its best economically, not politically. But David, as you may know, over the past 1 year or so, when the street violence goes on in Hong Kong, some try to turn away their heads from the facts of the violence, only concentrating on the political division inside the region. What do you make of practices like this? Meanwhile, will the implementation of this legislation further split Hong Kong? Are you going to see more violence in the streets, in a way? Well, the violence in the street is happening on a day-to-day basis. The fundamental of this national security law, frankly speaking, in my opinion, China have no choice. And Hong Kong also have not the luxury of time. The majority of the people of Hong Kong just want to go back to their normal day-to-day life. So basically, I sincerely believe the majority of the people in Hong Kong are very supportive.
Now, you've already seen some try to shape it in an ideological way, David. For example, suggesting that it is the communist China that is going to take away the freedom of Hong Kong, which Hong Kong should enjoy in one country, two systems. Others suggest that now the one country, two system works well in Hong Kong, but after this legislation, that is gone. Your thought?
Honestly, I think China really has been very supportive of Hong Kong. China have always been very sincere, and we all see in the last over 20 years, one country and two systems truly works. It works for Hong Kong, it works for China, it also works for the rest of the world. I just don't see this national security law implemented is only deal with very limited people. Unless you want to be a traitor of your country, unless you believe Hong Kong should be independent, it doesn't affect the day-to-day life of the majority people of Hong Kong. So I don't think it ever disturb the principle of one country, two systems.
Details about the national security law regarding Hong Kong SAR will gradually roll out in the coming months, but voices in Washington have already questioned Hong Kong's degree of autonomy. Is Hong Kong standing as an international financial hub in the balance? Some ask. What will be the outcome of this legislation eventually for the Hong Kong SAR? Undeniably, the political division in Hong Kong could definitely complicate matters in the near future. How can its legislative council and government proceed with carrying out the law? I speak to former president of the Hong Kong Legislative Council, Rita Fan, to find out more about history and about how she looks at the reality now in Hong Kong. Could you help me to understand your understanding of the latest decision made by the National People's Congress regarding the legislation of national security issues related to Hong Kong?
The purpose of this national security law for Hong Kong is really to ensure, first of all, that the one country, two system cannot be compromised by terrorist act, by mobsters' violent actions. And secondly, it also ensures that the secession of the country and the subversion of the government cannot take place. Thirdly, it would not allow foreign power or bodies to interfere with Hong Kong's internal affairs. In other words, to instigate, to plan, to teach the young people to do all kinds of illegal activities. And last but not least, to fight against terrorism. Our freedom, our human right, our freedom of expression, my right to go to any place in Hong Kong that I feel I want to go. These are all compromised because of their so-called pro-democracy and freedom movement. Well, it is not. Their freedom is the freedom for them only. Everybody else has to give way to what they want to do.
Mrs. Fan, one of the things people are very eager to know is whether this piece of legislation, after the whole process, will diminish the hope of one country system or actually abide by the principles of one country, two systems.
Well, what is one country, two systems? the two systems is the capitalist system in Hong Kong vis-a-vis the socialist system in mainland China. There is not going to be any change in this. The other important part is Hong Kong has been delegated the power of making our own laws by the Legislative Council, governing Hong Kong on all internal affairs by the Hong Kong SAR government, and judicial independence with the right of court of a final appeal. These are not in any ways compromised by the national security law. National security is for the whole country. Every inch of land of China must be covered by the same national security. Hong Kong's high degree of autonomy and our ability to govern ourselves in most of the areas will remain as it is delegated to us through the basic law. Some people are worried, after this national security law, our human right will be compromised. Well, let me tell you, that is not true. Because in the decision of the National People's Congress, the first item is to ensure that the right and privileges of Hong Kong people will continue. And then in the basic law, we have articles which ensures that the freedom of expression, freedom of traveling, movement, freedom of speech, all these are protected.
After this decision, after even the SAR government adopted this law and say, let's go ahead with it, how will Hong Kong repair its wounds as a result of political division, as a result of what happened over the past year, as a result of what is still going on right now in the streets, as a result of a very divided society? Mrs. Fan, how is Hong Kong going to do that?
We are determined to live the life we want to live. We want one country, two systems. And that system, as prescribed by the basic law, will continue on to work in Hong Kong. We will make sure, because it is our daily life, it is our livelihood. You know, for people who are not in Hong Kong and who are making all kinds of comments about Hong Kong, they don't have to pay any price if Hong Kong goes down the drain. But for a person living in Hong Kong, we are paying all the price for all their so-called ideology, or so-called dominance of the world, or so-called democracy which destroys democracy itself. I hope that they will understand. But if they don't, we will still go on, because we are determined to make our home a livable place.
Recently, fresh unrest rocked Hong Kong. Protests in Hong Kong have continued on Monday, with demonstrators arguing China's new security law for the city will deprive them of freedoms that should be guaranteed under one country, two systems. But in fact, realities are different. To understand the tension afflicting a city built as Asia's world city, it's important to focus on the city's education. What should be the role of teaching Chinese history in the overall education the young people in Hong Kong have in their school days, and how to do it for the young people in Hong Kong so that they will understand the past, the present, and the future better? About all of these very challenging questions, I speak to Annie Wu, former standing committee member of the CPPCC, to find out more. She's always been very passionate about education in Hong Kong. Ms. Wu, you're passionate about the young people and their education. Now, there is a latest debate about the liberal arts education, which deals with how history is being taught. So what do you make of the nature of the latest discussion. Ms. Wu.
20 years ago, I mentioned to the first chief executive of Hong Kong, Mr. Tong, I said, we are going through from a post-colonial period into the special administrative region of the People's Republic of China. And I suggested to Mr. Tong, day one, we have to use our education bureau to train our young people to understand the transformation. And they need to understand that they are Chinese, born in Hong Kong, but they have to understand the country is China. And at that time, I remember I mentioned to Mr. Dong, if you don't take care of the young people of today, 20 years from now, they will say they are only Hong Kong people, they are not Chinese. This is the problem that we have faced 20 years ago. And the outcome of all this violence, the young people have been, actually, I would use the word brainwashed by other interested parties to say they are Hong Kong people, they want to have independence, they don't want to be part of China. And so this young generation in Hong Kong, who are now the high school students, university students, including the teachers, have all been instigated by this kind of misunderstanding. It's not going to be easy to take care of the job, not only just to take Chinese history back out from liberal studies, but it's an effort that the Special Administrative Region of Hong Kong, the central government, and the people who are now living in Hong Kong to try to do the utmost to reinstate that Hong Kong is part of China, first of all. And Hong Kong, the Education Bureau has to really give the young people from day one to understand they are part of China, they are Chinese. This is a long-term uphill battle. It's not going to be easy.
The liberal arts education regarding history, there are already proposals being made as to how it should be changed, the content of the earlier component of the liberal arts education. But it's not easy to change, to include what you consider as important component. So what's next? Now, how can we proceed?
I think this is a total effort of the chief executive for the Special Administrative Region, and together with the director of the Education Bureau, together with the general public of Hong Kong, and also the teachers in the schools, they have to have a positive and a correct attitude to teach Chinese history. The main problem now is not the contents of the history books, it's how the teachers teach the history, the modern Chinese history. And some of them have been taught in a very inaccurate method. So the students have been taught in a very negative attitude about Chinese history. So it's very important if we can have one standardized textbook on modern Chinese history to educate the students, also to really educate the teachers to teach Chinese history properly. It takes a lot of effort because I think in Hong Kong, some of the teachers are pretty anti-China and also anti-Hong Kong.
Some from the opposition side in Hong Kong were trying to argue putting new content about the history of Hong Kong and its relation with the motherland and its colonial past might mean that the Hong Kong SAR government is trying to brainwash the young people in Hong Kong in a different way.
Personally, I feel they can look at how Singapore transformed from a post-colonial, I will use the city-state, into the Singapore of today. So if at that time the Singapore leaders like the late Lee Kuan Yew, if they did not write the correct Singapore history, I don't think the Singaporeans are so patriotic as of today. So to borrow a page from Singapore, Hong Kong, we need to re-identify ourselves as a special administrative region of China. So it's really important that we should rewrite Chinese history, the modern Chinese history correctly, and also to understand, to rewrite how Hong Kong transformed from the post-colonial period into SAR. And this is the duty and responsibility of the Hong Kong government. This is not what the opposite camp and not foreigners can interfere with what we are trying to do for our younger people of they are the citizens of tomorrow.
Annie very passionate about the education for the young people in Hong Kong. That's all we have for today. If you'd like to see more, you can certainly search us, World Insight, in your search engine, or check out our YouTube channel, follow us on Twitter, Facebook. And I'm Tian Wei in Beijing on behalf of the team. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.